We are thrilled to be joined now by Rolling Stone correspondent and MSNBC contributor Jack Crosby. He just filed his last dispatch from Ukraine, for now at least. He traveled hundreds of miles across the war-torn country. We're so glad you're back safely. Your reporting there is extraordinary. Your writing so vivid. I want to start with reading some of it, and then I'll get your reaction to everything we've just seen. I have the whole thing underlined, but it would take me the rest of the hour to read the whole thing. I'll pull these things out first. It seemed like every person I met along the way was in one of the stages of grief. Over dinner, I watched a woman, maybe a decade younger than me, eat a full meal while staring into space, her eyes shocked and blank. After I ate, I sat down at a table with a group of young employees of a Kharkiv-based digital design firm. They'd spent 4 days huddled in their office basement in the local metro before piling 11 people, 1 dog and 6 cats into a couple cars and fleeing the city under fire. Every night I see the war, Sophie, an artist, said. I don't want to sleep. I see it in my dreams. She laughed a little as she said this, probably knowing that it was a cliche, but it's also true. I've dreamed of cluster bombs while in beds in Uman and Lviv and in places in between. How you doing?
Better than I was.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, I think my experience has been similar in some ways to many Ukrainians in that country, but vastly different. As I've written about, my trip out of the country was going home for me. It was escaping all of this to a place that I knew was safe and secure. For many of them, they're leaving home and they're going to places that they're not sure will be secure. You know, I have sources, people that I've spoken to that fled frontline towns in Donbass and are now staying outside of towns in other cities that may come into the firing line in the next couple of days, and they may have to move again, or that may be the place that they stay and are trapped. You know, the woman that I spoke to there that you were just quoting out of, they've made it to a city. I was texting with them earlier today in the west of the country, and they're reasonably secure, but you know, the men in their group can't leave the country. They're not sure if they're going to be conscripted or asked to fight. And they're currently sharing, I think, 2 rooms in an apartment with all of those people and all of those pets, you know.
6 cats in one dog.
Yeah. And those are good conditions, I think, for a lot of people in the country.
What is the connection between this leader and his people right now? As you use the word, I want to get it right. You describe it as a new wave of savagery from Russia.
Yeah, I think what another person said to me that didn't make it into the piece was that if Putin had tried something like this in 2014 when he first invaded, if he had sort of gone for it bigger in what we're seeing now, that this young woman told me he might have succeeded. This was a politically divided country at that time. It had just undergone a revolution. It didn't really have a super strong sense of what its national identity was. But she said, you know, to me, she said, in 2014, a lot of us were younger. We weren't as politically engaged. We weren't thinking about these kinds of things. But we've been in this war for 8 years. We've seen what it's done to our friends and our families. And now that it's sort of exploded to the rest of the country, she was saying, it's made it very clear for all of us that we know who our enemy is in this case. And I think you see that reflected across a lot of the country. You've seen that in leaders in Ukrainian cities that had previously been more sympathetic to Russia, in cities like Odessa and in Mariupol itself, that are now just very adamantly clear about which side that they're on. And overwhelmingly, it's to their constituents and to their people who are suffering under this violence.
How did the country change? You know, war changes everyone who witnesses it and who covers it. War has come to them, and whether they've fled or whether they've stayed, they are now seeing their country brutalized by Vladimir Putin. How has that changed the people?
You know, like I said, I think a lot of people there are in different stages of grief and shock. You know, I've had so many conversations with people who are cheerful despite all of this and optimistic.
I interview folks from there, and they are sort of what you described. They're on the grief spectrum, but they have this fortitude that's extraordinary at a human level.
Yeah, you know, I think it's you can only spend so much time sort of bogged down in this horror and terror, and people's inclinations will often be to try and find small good things in their lives that they can look towards. They can find optimism. They can find, any kind of emotion that keeps them going. In some cases, that's denial. I've spoken to people who are saying, with hope, like, I hope this will be over in a week. I hope this will, be over in a month or something. And I think what we've seen of the conflict so far suggests that that's not true. But, they're determined to keep going. And there are a lot of people who are shocked and hurt and in pain. But I haven't seen too many people who have looked like they're completely sort of beaten and defeated, I think.
What is it that you understand about the Russian savagery from being there for the attacks on Kharkiv that we should understand when we watch the savagery and the attacks on Mariupol?
So I think what you're seeing here is the beginning of a playbook. I hate to use these sort of sports terms as they relate to war, but that is familiar to us. It's one that we've seen the Russian military use in Syria. It's one we've seen them use in Chechnya. It's one we've seen other modern militaries, including the U.S., use in certain places. And it's when you can't accomplish the objectives that you set out to accomplish through the means that you had, in this case, a Russian swift sort of lightning invasion aimed at toppling the government. You transition to a different type of warfare, which is to subdue and submit the people and the locations that you're trying to control by any means necessary. And that's very much what we're seeing here. And it's very clear that that's what we're going to see in cities across from Ukraine, anyone's where the Russian military can project that power. And this is going to be disproportionately felt by civilians.
I don't know if you were back yet, but I'm sure you saw Pulitzer Prize-winning war photographer Lindsay Adaria's photo on the front page of Monday's New York Times. She was our guest, and she said Russia is undoubtedly targeting civilians and women and children, and these are undoubtedly war crimes. Is that your sense of what you witnessed?
Yes. Yes. I think deliberate attacks on civilians are always a war crime. It's always something that any military should seek to avoid. It's one that many militaries do not. And the Russian military in particular, in this conflict and in other conflicts, has shown a near complete disregard for civilian life and has, in these cases, been deliberately targeting it. And I think that benefits them because, they can continue to sow fear and sow terror among people. They can make moving around the country as uncertain and unclear and unsafe as it possibly can be. And all of this fuels toward instability. It burdens the Ukrainian government, and it burdens Western governments and non-governmental organizations in trying to preserve these people's lives, which to the Russian government in this context do not matter.
Russian President Zelensky, there in that interview we played here for the first time, is making this argument about the no-fly zone, but it could apply to all of the debates taking place about how far we go and what we do. Having been in country, tell me what that debate sounds like.
You speak to people who are on the ground there, and of course they want a no-fly zone. People who are experiencing violence will reach for any solution to improve their situation immediately. I think it's a very difficult political question as to whether or not the United States should do that. Yeah, I have my own opinions on this. I think most people do. To me, it seems like it could be hugely destabilizing to the greater geopolitical situation, but people who are being shot at and bombed they're not thinking about that. They're not thinking about game theory and realism and the relationship between the United States and Russia. They're thinking about the fact that every night when they go to sleep, something could drop on their house and kill them. Mm-hmm. And so if there's a solution that's proposed in the media or by their leaders that promises to alleviate that, of course they're going to be attracted to that, and they're going to push for that, and they're going to advocate for that. That's a hard position for them to be in, and it's a hard position for everyone who has the privilege of having that one step of removal from there to think about those things in these terms. But they're not debating this in boardrooms. They're debating it in their kitchens.